If you'd like to be part of the conversation here this morning, you can. You can call us on our new phone system. And by the way, we got whatever the quirk was yesterday fixed. You can call us at 573-453-5505. I'd like to hear your input on these issues. You can simply dial 573-453-5505. And we'll bring you on the air, and we'll hear your opinion about your issues surrounding this issue with Bergdahl and the release of these Taliban detainees who were held at Gitmo and Guantanamo Bay for 12 years. I mean, these guys were considered and classified as the worst of the worst. And the 5 that were released the other day in exchange for Bergdahl was the second release. The first release occurred back in July and August when we released 5 more to set the table so that as a bribe, as an ante to the Taliban to begin talks. Not to mention, by the way, that the Taliban came out yesterday and said that they're cutting off all future talks with the United States, which, of course, the United States swears isn't happening in the first place. So go figure. I mean, who do you believe anymore, folks? I can tell you this. You can't believe the government and you can't believe the mainstream ministry of propaganda. You can't, because they're lying through their teeth to us. That's the truth. Everything that they tell you is subject to an enormous amount of review. In this case, or in this segment, we're going to talk about what the legal experts say, because there's a lot of them who are coming out. I mean, I heard yesterday Judge Napolitano. Now, some people would say, oh, he's partisan. Okay. Judge Napolitano came out and said on Megyn Kelly's show, Kelly File, that this is an offense which is clearly violative of the law. And the biggest problem was that they pointed out that it has to have his claim was that it was for aiding or material aid, providing material aid to the Taliban. Now, of course, Megyn Kelly, who's an attorney, by the way, herself, she made a very legitimate point, which is that the second part of that, I mean, yes, he falls under the category of the first part of that as a lawbreaker. However, under the second part of that, it says that you have to physically intend, there has to be intent in your assistance to aid and abet, right? And provide material assistance with the idea that you're giving comfort and aid to the enemy. And there has to be intent. That would be virtually impossible to prove, irrespective of what you suspect. However, that's not the only voice that's come out and raised the argument. Now, there was a couple out there, including Jeffrey Toobin. Now, Jeffrey Toobin is pretty much an apologist on Communist News Network. And he came out, and he's their legal analyst, kind of like what Judge Napolitano is on Fox. And he declared on Monday that President Barack Obama broke the law. That's his quote. When his administration failed to give Congress notice of at least 30 days before releasing the 5 ranking Taliban members from Guantanamo Bay. He argues that the presidential signing statement does not absolve Obama from culpability for failing to abide by the law. Quote, I think he clearly broke the law. The law says 30 days notice. He didn't give 30 days notice. He added that Obama's opinion expressed in the signing statement is not the law, and it can't be construed as part of the law. The law is on the books, and he didn't follow it, says Toobin. Well, with all due respect, I want to know where all of these pundits were when he was doing the same thing with Obamacare. I want to know where all the pundits were when he was doing the same thing with the IRS. I want to know where all these pundits were about Fast and Furious, where they are about immigration, where they are about the DREAM Act. Wolf Blitzer asked him and pointed out that George Bush also issued signing statements, even though their action may not have been constitutional or illegal. But liberals, he pointed out, Blitzer in other words, liberals were outraged by George Bush's signing statements. And then Blitzer looked over at Toobin and said, you realize, of course, you're accusing the President of the United States of breaking the law. And Toobin said, I do think that his critics have a very good point here. He pointed out that Congress and the courts are unlikely to do anything about it, however. But it matters whether people follow the law or not. Well, of course it matters, because if we don't have the law, then we don't have anything. We're not a republic anymore. We're gangland thuggery, which is what I've been saying all along. That's exactly what we are. And we were under Bush, and we were under Clinton, we were under Bush Sr., we were under Reagan, and I mean, it just goes on and on and on. We were even under Peanut Boy Carter. I mean, come on, folks. Are you trying to tell me this is something new? You're welcome to call in with your comments, by the way. 573-453-5505. So, if Toobin's saying that, who else is saying that? Well, Jonathan Turley. Now, Toobin, by the way, for the record, he's the legal analyst at Communist News Network, CNN. But Jonathan Turley is a law professor, and he is a self-proclaimed a voter for Obama in both elections. And he actually states repeatedly that he agrees with his policies. He just doesn't agree with the way he's breaking the law. He's a constitutional professor, and he's a professor at George Washington University of Law. He said on Monday that he doesn't believe there's much debate over whether the White House broke the law by releasing the 5 high-ranking Taliban prisoners. He notes that even the White House is seriously arguing that it's not violating the law, or that it didn't violate the law. He also was invited to Communist News Network, and he spoke with Carol Costello, who's one of their anchors over there. And he said, Costello asked him, did the White House violate federal law? And Turley replied, they did. I don't think that the White House is seriously arguing that they're not violating federal law. And to make matters worse, this is a long series of violations of federal law that the president's been accused of. This is going to add to that pile. I don't think there's much debate that they're in violation of the law. He argued that Obama is essentially arguing the very same principle as George Bush, that when it comes to Gitmo, he has almost absolute power, that it's his prerogative, his inherent authority to be able to make these decisions as he sees fit. Folks, ask yourself, is that a republic, or is that some sort of a quasi-totalitarianistic fascist dictatorship? I mean, if a president has the right to make unilateral decisions about everything from life to death relating to anyone who the administration claims to be a threat, is that what we believe as a nation? Costello asked him, well, does it matter? In other words, all of this law breaking, does it matter? Because the administration says that the Department of Defense consulted with the Justice Department, and that was enough. Does it matter? And again, I'm going to point you to something. I mentioned this yesterday, that just because the Justice Department says, hey, you've got our blessing here, doesn't make it legal, doesn't make it right. I mean, look, in fascist dictatorships across the planet, they've got legal experts that say, sure, you're entitled to do anything you want. I mean, I hate to bring up the argument and use the term Hitler, because as soon as you do that, everybody goes, oh, I want to plug my ears. Well, they made it legal to kill the people that they construed to be mentally ill or not a benefit to society, including the mentally retarded and Down syndrome children. They made it completely legal. It doesn't make it right, but they did give legal backing to the decision. Now, these weren't people that they killed over a theological discussion or difference. These weren't people that they killed because they were Jews. These were Germans. They made it legal. If you're mentally retarded and you're going to pollute our gene pool, went their theory, then we have the right to take you out. And they got legal authority and backing to make those decisions. That didn't make it right. They had legal authority and backing to seize the property and the people of anyone who, what? Not just because they were Jewish, but if you disagreed with the administration, if you fought back against what the Nazis were doing, and you were a German citizen of pure Aryan blood, they made it legal for you to be disenfranchised, stripped of your property and your holdings, and thrown into a prison just for disagreeing, for working towards a humanitarian effort of trying to hide other people that were being ostracized and persecuted. Does that make it right? Just because their legal authorities said, yeah, it's legal. I mean, Stalin did the same thing. Mao did the same thing. Pol Pot did the same thing. Idi Amin did the same thing. Doesn't make it right. Castro did the same thing. We deplore all of those scenarios. Why would we be willing to accept it from our own president? Again, Costello asked, well, does it matter? Because the administration says the Department of Defense consulted with the Justice Department. And that was enough. Does that matter, she said. Well, unfortunately, said Turley, the Justice Department has been involved in many of these controversies, and they tend to support federal power. The federal law seems quite clear. And the fact that you have negotiations that have gone on for years really undermines the argument that this was a matter where time was of the essence. He went on to say, clearly you have committees with classified proceedings, people who have been cleared for this information that could have been consulted. And this is really the reason that they enacted the law. So what he's basically stating there, and Turley, again, he's an Obama advocate in terms of his presidency, but he likes his policies, the social justice and the liberal thinking, but he doesn't like the fact that he's constantly breaking the law. I mean, I wouldn't agree with Jonathan Turley on a lot of the policy decisions that Barack Obama has made, and I probably wouldn't agree on a lot of the reasons why he approved or voted for him. But I have to admit that at least Turley is honest enough, intellectually honest, and true enough to the ideals of what he believes in and teaches at a university to come out and say, hey, the guy's breaking the law, even though I support him. We need 10,000 more like him. And he's right. The Justice Department has always supported this president, even when, but it's a de facto, it's a de facto fraud when you've got the Justice Department that supports every illegal administrative maneuver that the president makes. First of all, the president appointed this particular attorney general. So you can't expect that the attorney general is going to find against his own boss and his benefactor, quite frankly, which is why the Department of Justice should never be appointed by the administration itself. In fact, the whole idea of a federal Department of Justice, I can understand that we want one because there are instances where the federal government needs guidance. But it should be a minuscule organization of 20, 25 people, not 25,000, who are running around prosecuting average, everyday Americans for all these crimes that have become federal felonies that, quite frankly, the federal government has no right to even make a decision about. These aren't crimes. The Constitution doesn't call for federal crime. Those are state crimes. You're to be prosecuted in state courts under state rules. There are no federal crimes except treason. It's the only federal crime there is, folks. With a couple of limited exceptions. But the idea that, we've turned everything into a federal crime because, you crossed a state boundary. Oh, come on. it would have been a state crime were it not for the fact that you drove over a border with that marijuana in the trunk or whatever the case may be. So now it's a federal crime. That's the way they interpret it. I mean, what it has turned into is a massive overreach. This Justice Department is, look, no one at this point can justify what this Justice Department has become. No one. Now, Senator Claire McCaskill, she came out and she is screaming that the GOP's criticism on the swap is unwarranted. Her argument is that if the guy had died, that it came out later on that there was an opportunity here and the president didn't take it, that the Republicans would be going crazy, and she's right. But the truth is, the guy was not, first of all, in much danger. Second of all, they could have alleviated that concern by simply exposing the truth to the American people. Do you think the American people and or the Republicans would have jumped in line behind a guy who was a clear deserter? They knew he was a deserter. They classified him as such themselves. In fact, they didn't have him listed as a prisoner of war. So how can you call him they wouldn't list him as a prisoner of war, but simultaneously they gave him 2 promotions. First to specialist from General Grunt to sergeant. See, the whole thing is just ridiculous because she's sitting here trying to defend the indefensible by using the argument that, well, if it turns out later on that this opportunity was out there and the president didn't take advantage of it, and somehow or other this guy slipped on a rock and fell and broke his brain open, and then he died in the hands of the Taliban, that everybody would be throwing. Well, I wouldn't disagree with that argument, but I would say that the fair argument would have been for the government to come forth and say openly and make it public, Bo Bergdahl has deserted, and therefore we're not under any obligation to put anyone else or any more time or the American people or any other soldiers at risk. End of argument. But you see, they were more interested in achieving their agenda, which is furthering the Taliban's activities. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is aiding and abetting an enemy, providing material assistance. And I don't care that Qatar has given us a 1-year guarantee of house arrest, because during house arrest, one, they can conduct any kind of leadership they want. I heard one of these knuckleheads yesterday talking on one of the news programs saying, well, these guys are going to be held there in Qatar and they're not going to have, their network has been broken apart because they've been in prison for 12 years and their networking capabilities are over. Horse hockey. These guys were accepted back as heroes. And they'll be elevated immediately to positions of leadership and authority. That kind of thinking assumes, first and foremost, that they are operating on Western thought processes, which they ain't. And if we haven't learned that by now, we really shouldn't be in Afghanistan and Iraq or anywhere else in the Middle East. They don't think the way we think. And frankly, these people in government don't think the way we think either. They don't use rational, logical, well-reasoned arguments. They don't look at consequences. They don't look beyond to find out and role play it out to say, let's play this tape to the end and see how it comes out. An administration that was acting with responsibility would have said, you know what? The weight of this and the weight of releasing these 5 people, the risk does not balance out the benefit that we get by getting back Mr. Bergdahl. And when the American people find out about this, the top of their head's going to go bonk. And guess what happened? The top of Americans' heads are going whoop. And these idiots didn't even think about it. Their argument was, well, we were just as surprised by what we saw in the media. Here we go again with the media. I mean, you cannot talk about more ineptitude and absolute keystone coppery than these people have shown us. This sycophant McCaskill says, we saved this man's life. Well, guess what? Even the liberal newscasters who were trying to find something to apologize for this guy's behavior for could not get Susan Rice to say his life was ever in danger. There's nothing to substantiate that. That's another one of these claims like we got in Benghazi. She says that we saved this man's life. The commander-in-chief acted within his constitutional authority. Well, I beg to differ, Ms. McCaskill. Number one, you may be an attorney, an esquire, but I can tell you this. Every constitutional expert out there disagrees with you. And you are, if anything, you are the furthest thing from a constitutional expert. She says, we saved an American life on foreign soil. The president and foreign policy gets criticized. Are you seeing a theme here? It's politics. No, what is politics, Ms. McCaskill, is that statement you just made. And you should be ashamed of yourself. And if any American heard it and didn't pick it up for exactly what that was, the pot calling the kettle black, then that's a failure of critical thinking. The truth is, every legal expert in the nation is calling it what it is. An act of lawlessness on the part of our government, on the part of our own president. And now I just want to know, since the president had a private meeting with Hills, did she know? I can't wait to hear this backpedal. All right, our next segment, Heaven's Gate, Jim Jones, and the climate change movement. I'm going to draw some correlations for you that I think are important because I want you to understand exactly how desperate and how illogical what's going on with climate change and the EPA and the Pentagon and all of this movement towards solving a problem that doesn't exist has become. It's irrational. And it's a cult. And your president is leading the charge. He's the Jim Jones. It's a cult of suicide. Problem is, we're not asked whether or not we want to be dragged along with it. The cult is making decisions on our behalf. All right, make sure that you support our friends over at Battery Station. You can find them on the web at batterystation.com. And they have an enormous product supply of and selection of batteries, many of which they private label themselves. And get those because those are the least expensive ones, and they're exactly what you'd get paying twice as much in the store for them. They have a full selection of every kind of light, headlamp, batteries, all kinds of vehicle batteries, motorcycle batteries, boat batteries, the whole 9 yards. Everything down to those little tiny little widget batteries. You can call them at 417-257-7799. You can go to their website at batterystation.com. And you can visit them at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains, Missouri, if you like. While you're there, make sure that you swing by our friends at Pizza Hut. Today is reduced price lunch. It's $5, and you get the full pizza bar and salad bar. And then tonight, kids under 12 eat free, and it's family night. So swing in there and take advantage of that, especially at the Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard in West Plains. That's the place to go. Make sure that you tell them you heard about their program and this ad on America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. When we come back, Heaven's Gate, Jim Jones, and the climate change movement. Should be an interesting segment, folks. We'll be right back.